So the role of a producer on that show, which is the role I had, there were 3 of us. And we had to come up with ideas, we had to book them, we had to pre-interview them, and then we would put them on air. And we would hand one piece of paper to the host, he would look at it, and then it was like, during the breaks, I'd go up if they weren't saying the things that they had told me, I'd go, don't forget to bring this up, don't forget to bring that up. But he ran that show from top to bottom for 1 hour, and that's the way it ran. Flash ahead. After he retires, 6 years later, he comes back to do Donahue at MSNBC. My experience had primarily been in talk television. This was news, this was different. But MSNBC at that time was trying to be a liberal outlet. It was the beginning of it, not where it is now. It was at the beginning. So it was a very different scene. It was a very different scene. So this show now had breaks that you had to meet. So if you were 5 minutes in, you had to get off immediately at that or you'd be cut off. For him, since he'd run and done all of his timings, it threw him at first. He didn't know how to do it. He wanted to keep going. The other thing is and this still applies, most of the hosts that are at MSNBC, at CNN, at Fox, have earpieces. So while they're talking to somebody's usually talking in their ear saying, going to break in a minute. If they miss something and they're not asking it, because I would be the one that was in Phil's ear and the controller. Don't forget to ask this. Go here, go there. So it's really hard to do that. I want to go back a little bit because I worked on a variety of shows and they're different, but in each and every one I learned something about working with talent and especially about working with people who have no experience with television. So I told you a little bit about Donahue. We would go in, we would get you going, tell you what you wanted to do. The next show I worked on that was significant was the Joan Rivers show, which was a very different kind of show because she was a comedian. She'd start out doing jokes. She'd talk about what was in gossip, and then she'd bring guests on. And unlike Donahue, she wanted questions for these guests. So you would do a pre-interview. Again, the producer would do a pre-interview, and then they would write down everything that was on it. You'd come up with questions for that guest, and you'd give it to Joan. And she worked from those questions. It wasn't like, she would go off, if he asked somebody something and it took her in a direction, she would go there. But generally speaking, she stayed with questions. So those guests, you'd go in and you'd prep. Some of them would be professionals. Howard Stern, you didn't have to talk to. But if it was somebody talking about makeup or somebody talking about something else or somebody talking about sex life, you'd have to go and say, this is what to expect, this is what's going to happen. Another experience that was very different, but also speaks to the same thing, is when Oprah went off the air in Chicago, the station there wanted to had to replace it, and they didn't want to do something that was like Oprah. They didn't want to do one topic, 1 hour, or whatever she was doing at that time. So I was brought in as the executive producer to come up with an idea for a show, cast it, talk to people to see who I thought would be doing a good job, and then train them so that they could then do that job. And a little bit of that takes place in everything with people who go from doing like news to talk, or talk to news. There's a training period. It's a very different world, and it's not always so easy to transition to those worlds. So anyway, the 2 in Chicago that I worked with were news people, and they basically read news copy. That's what they did. That was all they did. Except now they had to fill 20 minutes of time at the top of their show. And so what we decided to do was try to do something that was like The View. And the way we prepped them to do that was we went, okay, here's pieces of paper, here's stories that are out there, you guys have to talk for 20 minutes. It was the best training, because honestly I'd done another show, which I'd just blown completely, because I'd worked now with Phil Donahue and Joan Rivers, very accomplished people, and so I thought from that point forward I was going to be lucky enough to work with those kinds of people. And so what happened next was when I went to this next group, they weren't of that caliber and they needed hand-holding, and I didn't realize it. So when I did the last job, I learned from that, and I basically showed them how to do that kind of thing. And the reason I'm telling you all this is not like just to go down memory lane, but in every single time a camera's by you or near you, or you're talking to it, or you're meeting with somebody that you're sitting across from, there's a dynamic that you're not aware of usually. I'm going to start, if I can, with what's out there right now so you know where the opportunities might be. There's morning television, which is the Today Show, Good Morning America, Fox. Those are the three biggies, I would say. They have a producer that oversees the first hour, and that's a very newsy hour. The second hour, if you've been watching those shows, are very fluffy. CBS News is probably the newsiest. That's it. What happens on those things and those locations is they have bookers. And generally there's a department. So there's general stuff that could fit in any day of the week. The bookers are looking for the biggest stories that have happened, and they're going after them to recruit those people to come in. And the others are ones that producers may have suggested and that they've booked. The evening news is, and those pieces in the morning shows are about 3 minutes in length. That's about what they are. If you watch them, they don't generally go over that. I was working with a woman who was very talented, very good, stayed on message, could do everything. She was on GMA. They put her at a table with the three hosts, and in essence what she got was like 40 seconds. They flew her in, they put her up in a hotel, they brought her there, and she had to figure out a way in 40 seconds to make anybody that was watching interested in what she had to say, maybe in her book or whatever. And that is the essence of really what you have to do. And whether you're standing on a street corner, whether you're sitting across from Rachel Maddow, whatever. So nightly news, going back to that so I don't get too distracted. Nightly news, at NBC when I was there, there's a news call once a day, and everybody from around the corner the country gets on that call. Since I'd never done that before, the first time I was on one of those calls, it was so fascinating to me because they discussed what they were going to talk about and what the stories were out there that they would pick. And there were like 20 people on that call. They're tapping into something that's happening on the spot. And maybe at the end of the broadcast, if it's CBS, they're letting Steve Hartman do something really lovely and touching. But the rest of the stories are what's going on with the trial. I didn't check in as much today as I normally do because I was trying to prep for this. So whatever is going on today that you're thinking about, they've discussed this morning. They've gotten back for another meeting this afternoon to see if it's still pertinent and if they want to do it, and they go from there. If you go into the night section of the days where you go to MSNBC, CNN, or Fox, that's opinion news. It's discussion more than anything else. It's personality driven. You get the most amount of time on those shows. You really do. I'm going to talk about Patricia. You all saw Patricia that she's a member of Rise and Resist. On the 4th of July, she was part of an action, which was supposed to be a banner drop, and she then scaled the Statue of Liberty. She got coverage from everyone pretty much because that's pretty significant. Nobody does that. She was a big story. She was on the news. She was talked about. They put tape up of that situation nonstop. As a result of that, and I'd like to ask, maybe you know Andy, I don't know how many requests she got for interviews. Do you?
Within the first 24 hours, probably 30 to 40.
Were any of them the morning shows or things like that? Did she get the Today Show, GMA, or CBS?
Yeah, but she had decided to do one print, one TV, and one radio.
Okay. Well, if she was doing that, she made the right choice. She was on the Rachel Maddow show, which was in the top 10 shows in cable, in fact, the top 3, sometimes the top 2. And what she got on that show was 7 minutes. And it's not that she got to talk for 7 minutes, because that didn't happen. But I went back to look at it, because I thought if you're doing media training, you've got to realize, first of all, where those options are for you, and then what you get when you're there. So if you go back and look at that performance by her, and she was on with a man named Jay Walker from Rise and Resist. More than likely what happened is she got a call. They sent a car for her to make sure that she would show up. They did makeup. More than likely, a producer may or may not have talked to her. And the reason for that is in news, they don't want to coach you. They're not supposed to coach you. They're supposed to talk to you, and that's it. And probably Rachel had article, it wasn't Rachel though, it was Joy that was filling in for her that did it. So I went back and watched to see the amount of time that she got. It started out with 1:40 of tape. It was basically Joy saying the 4th of July is a very special time and significant in this country, and this is what happened. Then they showed, as part of this, a clip where she said, well, our dear First Lady, Michelle Obama, why did you do it? Our First Lady, Michelle Obama, said, when they go low, you go high, and I went as high as I could go. Two things are important about that. That's what we call a soundbite. It's like within so many seconds, and everybody played that. Everybody. I don't think she planned it. I think that was in her heart, and that's what she was doing, and I think it just came out. But she had sense, and she basically knew what to say when she was asked that question. I'm going to just go through something. I have to grab a piece of paper with this. All right. So she's asked that. So it's 1:40 into a 7-minute interview, and she is asked her first question. Then they go to Jay, and the questions go back and forth. In the course of the 7 minutes, my point is, Jay talked for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. She talked for a little over 2 minutes. So they got 4 minutes and 40 seconds out of that interview. And it was terrific. I mean, it was more than you will ever get on a morning show, more than you will ever get on nightly news. Do you watch, how many of you watch nightly news? Anybody? Because the ratings are, you do. You know how they will interview, they'll be on location, they'll go up to 2 or 3 people, here's the flood, how do you feel about it? 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 seconds. That's it. They got 4 minutes and 40 seconds. And they utilized it in the best of way. When they were asked questions, they didn't say yes, no, anything like that. They kind of knew where they were going, and they answered it and used up the time effectively. So that's one situation, and that's one place you can do things. I want to tell you about the makeup of these places and the hierarchy, so you know. There's an executive producer on a lot of these shows that oversees, like in the morning, their hours. They hire the staff. They take care of the talent. They make sure that everything goes the way it's supposed to. They manage up, generally, and they also have to manage down, but you better be good at managing up if you want to stay in your job. So they will have a supervising producer, usually, who helps everybody who's working get the product that they want to. And then there's the producer, and the producer is the one that's generally the most hands-on. If you're going to be interviewed by somebody, now I'm talking about studio shows at this moment in time. I'm not talking about being out in the streets or any of that. If you're going to be in the studio, somebody's going to talk to you. They're going to see how you talk. If you're slow, if you make your points succinctly, they have to get a sense of you. If you're Patricia, who's climbed the Statue of Liberty, you get a break. But if you're not, and you're a resistance person who wants to come in and talk, you better be the best resistance person that's going to talk. Because not only do they want to do a good show, you're graded on this. In essence, you are graded. Because we get ratings every single day. And it's by the minute. You know exactly how things went. And if you as a producer say to them, you've got to have Dan on, he's the best person. We have a choice of 15 people who are in the resistance, but Dan's the guy. And Dan comes on and freezes, it's not a happy day for the producer. It's like you have to, and that's why the coaching and the media training is important. But it's truly, that's the way it works. It's that simple. So then you also have bookers, and I told you about bookers. Bookers are, on our show on Donahue at MSNBC, we had our own booker because we were going to be more like a talk show than a news show. But we did use the MSNBC bookers to get us the experts that you see everywhere. So if we wanted a general, we'd say, oh, can we get General such and such tonight? But anybody else, we booked ourselves. So when you go into the studio, I told you, you're going to be treated really well generally. They're going to take care of you. You're going to get makeup. You don't have to worry about it. What I want to make a point about, though, is the landscape of television is changing dramatically. There are fewer opportunities. There really are. I will just talk about MSNBC because that's the one I watch the most and the one that I know the best. If you look at MSNBC, if they're talking about this trial, when that verdict comes in, they know exactly who's going to be sitting in those seats. That's planned. That's why they always go, and they are an MSNBC contributor, or they are a CNN contributor. Or, I mean, they've cut out the opportunity for many people to be on. And the list of the contributors they have is really large. When I was there, I think there were like, seriously, it was mostly the generals because they wanted to lock them in because there was a run-up to war. It was right before the Iraq War. So that's who they had locked in. Now they've got attorneys. They've got, across all boards, they're covered. So it's not, you don't get much of a chance if you're not on their list. And you will see from time to time the people that they bring in to try out. It's usually on the weekends, and it's usually, if they move to the daytime or to nighttime, you'll know that they're doing well. So because of that, there's fewer and fewer opportunities. But there's a new world that offers, I think, amazing opportunities, and that's social media. It makes up for it in many ways. I was really amazed at the numbers that I saw for the shows and how poorly they're doing. You know, when everybody goes the #1 show on Fox News, you're talking about 3 million people. Now that's a significant number, but it's 3 million people in a country of over 300 million. So think about the numbers you're talking about. And when you're talking about CNN, it's far less than that. And so the nightly news shows are like 7 million. And the morning shows are about a million, no, there may be 3 and the others are 1, but whatever it is, the range here is between 7 million and 1 million people. And people are fighting to get those spots. If you ever get booked on one of those shows, and you know who you're going to be with, whether it's Rachel Maddow or somebody else, do your homework. Watch that show. Know what she's about. Look up her bio. Prepare yourself to meet with her. Ask questions. One of the things Patricia did, and I just think she just didn't know, and this is no, I'm not certainly putting her down in any way for it, but one of the questions she was asked, she went to say something to Joy, and she goes, Miss Reed, or can I call you Joy? Those kinds of questions you have, you should ask ahead of time if you can. So when you meet with the producer, you go, how should I address the host? How long will this segment be? So you have an idea of what you need to, maybe hone down and all of those things. Ask questions. It's okay for you to do that. They're not going to think less of you. In fact, they'll respect you more. In fact, if they call to book you, ask them then, how much time is this? If it's a nightly show, you're going to get much more time than it's another type of show. Okay. The biggest thing here, I think, honestly, is messaging. And if I'm looking at Rise and Resist and I'm looking at other groups that are out and trying to get attention, what I've noticed is that it's events, it's actions. There are signs, there are chants, there are locations. And sometimes, depending on the numbers, there are news people there that are going to talk to them or meet with people. But a lot of time they're not. And I think when I talk about opportunities, this is where I see them. Because let's say, excuse me, I'm jumping around a little bit. But a friend of mine worked in local television in news in New York. And I asked him about how they handled events like protests. And he goes, well, what we do, he said for a while there we would go to Foley Square. He said it was around the time it was about the taxes and the 1%. He said there'd be a lot of people there, there'd be a lot of groups, but nobody knew who to talk to because there were so many groups that there wasn't a point person. Producers want to know who to go to. They want to. They have to know who it is that they're going to talk to. So if Rise and Resist is there, and an immigration group is there, and another group is there, and they're trying to find out who's like overseeing that, they won't know who to choose. And as I was thinking about this, I thought there should be more coordination between the groups. There really should be. So that if you're going there and it's a joint group or somebody's having an event and you're part of it, you can say, are you going to do, or if the press comes, are you going to talk to them or should we? But somebody should be prepared. There should never be a moment when there's a camera there that the only thing that they're shooting is the protest and the signs and the chants. Missed opportunity. Big time missed opportunity. So what I would say is messaging is the most important thing you can do. When you're talking about doing an interview, you're talking about a minimal amount of time, and we're talking about a minute. You should be able to tell something about your group in a minute. And so when you're asked a question, you go, well, why are you here? Well, Rise and Resist backs this because we're about immigration and we're a direct action group and blah, 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 blah. But each of you, how many groups are here, by the way? I know Rise and Resist is here. Would somebody just tell me what other groups are here? Yes, sir.
I'm working with my daughter on getting her into the Boy Scouts. She's been at this for 7 years, and actually they just changed the name, but they still want her.
Oh, wow. Is she doing a lot on social media?
She's done a lot on social media. She's working with the National Organization for Women locally,
Nice.
and she's been on the BBC and PR and done pretty well, but we're looking for the next step.
Do you have a publicist?
No.
Okay, let me tell you this other thing. There's certainly having a publicist, but there's a cost associated with that. There are booking departments at all of these shows, and all of the groups should know who their contact is at those shows. That should be part of the due diligence that's done by the group. The other thing is, the shows in the evenings have producers. Who's the executive producer? Who's the supervising producer? Get those names. So that the way to get on, if they're not coming after you, and I keep going back to the Statue of Liberty, but honest to God, how many shows have you seen, like on the programs I'm talking about, how many shows have you seen that have just featured somebody who is a resistor? Many? Okay. So, and producers can be overwhelmed, and I'm going to tell you this, when you think about the volume of the material they have to create, they love it when somebody presents an idea to them that they can see a tie-in to. And it might be as simple. I'll tell you about something I saw, and I put it on your list of things to view. Am I making you crazy because I'm jumping all over the place? Because I'm not very focused. But I'm trying to give you as much information as I can. Also, if you have questions, raise your hand. On Colbert, 2 years ago, one of his earliest guests was Delray McKesson, who is associated with Black Lives Matter, and he was on to talk about something else he was doing. That was not when he was doing political stuff. He had a different producer at the time. His current producer's name is Chris Lick. And Chris Lick started Morning Joe, and then he jumped to CBS, and he rebooted CBS Morning News. And then he went from there to Letterman. So he's had quite an impact on the politics and everything else of what's going on at this point in time. Anyway, Chris Licht is not the person you want to call. You want to find somebody on his staff, perhaps. But back to Delray McKesson. So Delray McKesson had 8 minutes with Colbert. And Colbert asked tough questions. It wasn't a walk in the park. He gave him grief. And McKesson was so good. He knew what he was going to say. He didn't say it too long. He was right to the point. At one point, Colbert got up and went behind the desk and let him come behind the desk, and he sat down. That was planned. When you look at it, don't think that it wasn't planned. It was planned. There's no way that was spontaneous. He knew. Because you can look at Delray McKesson and you can see the look on his face like he knows it's coming. But it was very effective and very good. And Delray McKesson also wears the blue vest. Any of you know the guy with the blue vest that's associated with Black Lives Matter? But that's the last time I've ever seen anything on Colbert like that. And the reason that he was booked was it was Martin Luther King Day. And somebody went to that booking department or one of those producers on that show and said, hey, I've got a good booking for you for Martin Luther King Day. And they booked him. So there are opportunities that you can create for yourself. There are. But you have to tie them to something. With your daughter, I don't know what day that might be. They might be looking at
They
it.
changed the rules last October 11th. But they said that's when they announced that they were going to let in girls, or they actually, they're waiting for something.
So no girls have been allowed in.
Nope, they announced it and then sat on it.
Okay, that's a good story. And maybe that's a Joy Reid story. The reason I'm telling you to look at people, yes, Andy?
Question.
Yeah.
To return a bit to the point you were talking about earlier, I've been in protests that might be related to some kind of government action where, you know, Cuomo or de Blasio or someone is speaking, and that's kind of the focus. But there's a protest going on, and so print journalists and TV journalists will go talk to maybe 3 or 4 people who are protesting, and they'll give, like, you know, 4 or 5 minutes each of conversation. And out of that 15 minutes total, they're gonna run like maybe 1 or 2 quotes in the paper or on the news. Like they're gonna do a big piece on the backstory, some government officials, and then they're gonna like jump to one activist. So if you want it to be you and your message, I'm wondering a little bit more kind of the pointers you have about, you know, what do I say, what do I do to get my counter message, to communicate clearly, to get that out to a wider audience.
Okay, I will do that. I promise you I'll get there. But back to you for a second. That's good, and you have to find the right person to do it. And that's why you watch these different shows and see what they like and who the host is that might be drawn to that. And then you pursue them relentlessly. What you're talking about, Andy, is about the messaging. Every one of you with each of your groups has a message. I'm going to throw ICE out there because I think ICE is controversial, and I think it's being used. When you see abolish ICE, and you can disagree with me, but I want to get your thoughts on this. When you're protesting abolish ICE, if somebody comes up to you and says to you, and this is what's being raised all over the place, is, oh, you want to let everybody in this country, we're going to just get rid of ICE, and then people are going to walk through the borders. What would you say? And that's up to each of your organizations. You have to look at those things that are important to your groups, and you have to plan messaging. Without question, you can't ever be caught off guard. You have to know when you're at a protest what it's about. If it's being covered, be aggressive and go right up to them. I'm from Rise and Resist. I'd like to talk to you. But know what you're going to say. Absolutely know what you're going to say. And once that messaging is clear, like I put on the back of the list several things for you to check out. And it was on ICE. And one was with Alexandra Cortez, with the middle name that I'm forgetting.
O'Connor.
Thank you. Where she talked about it, and she talked about what she meant by abolish it, and how it came into play after the towers went down. And then I put on Elizabeth Warren, who never used the word, abolish. She said replace. So you've got to figure out what the goal is. And I'm glad you brought this up, because I went back to the mission statement for Rise and Resist, which we read at the top of each meeting every week. And it's about direct action and drawing attention to everything that is going on that's awful, and standing up for immigrants and gay people and people that are being discriminated against. In the second paragraph, it talks about, in fact, it's not even called the mission statement. It says in the description, we aim to oust the Trump administration, fight for equality, and collaborate on a wide variety of social justice issues. Okay? That to me is an important statement. It's as important as anything that's above it. And the reason for that is, let's go back to ICE and what is the message, okay? If you say abolish ICE and the Republicans are using that as a major point of contention to say that we're all liberal nuts that want open borders, does that help you accomplish this goal? If Elizabeth Warren is using replace, if Alexandra is using a different way of putting it, then do you want to use they've got to go no matter what? You're now faced with somebody who's going to give you 1 minute to talk to them. What are you going to say? You have to have that message. You have to have that message. So that's the most important thing you can do. So each of the groups, like in Rise, I'm speaking to Rise and Resist because I'm most familiar with it. If you've got immigration, You're talking about abolish ICE. What is the message? That group has to sit down and decide what it is. Then they have to agree that this is the message they want to do. And then you have to practice coming up with some lines that are a minute long and questioning each other. When you do real, true media training, you don't do groups. I'm giving you such an overview, it's not that. If we were doing media training and we were talking about ICE and I was talking to you, we would spend hours talking about messaging. Then we would sit down and someone else would interview you and ask you question after question after question till you got it to a point where it was a very concise message. That's the way it's done. And as part of that, because I know this interests you, if you have an interview, the live interviews are the best because they're the most lengthy. Anything done on the street, you got to figure you're going to have 15 to 20 seconds, and you'll be lucky if they use that. But if you're punchy and good, I'm sorry, our First Lady, Michelle Obama, said when they go low, we go high. Everybody remembers when she said that because they'd never heard that before, and it was powerful. She used that, and that was a line that everybody played. It sounds like it's very rehearsed and not real, but it has to be. At some level, you've got to know what's important. What's your mission? Is it to go and demonstrate, or is it to get rid of this president? And how do both of those meld together? Because for me, as I've thought about this, and as I've seen all of these shows with little to no opportunities, unless you create them yourself and you go, hey, we want to do this, and you come up with some amazing idea to pitch a producer. If you don't get that, and if you don't do something that gets national attention, then your opportunities are on the street. And this is a great time to take advantage of them. It's an amazing time. My friend that worked in news, that went down to Foley Square, because I don't think I finished this, but if I did, just stop me. He said, we send people down on bicycles with their phones. He goes, and they become their own reporters. They interview people. They do, they talk to people. They shoot the stuff, and then we'd edit and put it on. What we do currently, and what I think we should change, and I would recommend it to you guys as well. How many of you go to events and actions? Do you all? Okay. How many of you tape what you're doing and post it? Okay. Fewer people. Okay? But is there generally somebody from your group there that's doing that? And by the way, I have screwed up more tape than anybody else on the Restor's County with my phone, but I'm getting better all the time. Here's what I would recommend. While the action is in the background, Blake, stand up, Blake. They're shouting and doing all of that. You're standing here. You're standing with your back to them. And I have my camera, and I'm shooting horizontally. What are you protesting? What's your group and what are you protesting? While that's going on, now you see a face and you're getting the point of view of the group that is speaking. From now on, any of the events I do, I'm going to do that. I'm going to pull people who are trained, who know what they're going to say, out from the group and let them talk. And every single time you do that, there's got to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. When people are writing stuff, they go when, where, why, and how. No, well, there's 5. Anyway, when, where, why, who, and how. Anyway, with this is somebody, you get your people out and you tape them. And it's like you're reporting the story. You're not waiting for somebody to pick you up and give you 10 seconds. And don't make it excessively long. It's a good way to practice. It's a good way to get your message down. It's a good way to see the faces of the people that are out there protesting. And I think it would be far more effective. Randomly, and I'm not on Instagram as much as a lot of people are. I posted a few pictures, and then I posted a tape. It got 10 times the response that. So then I went back and I looked at all of the stuff. And actually, when we do live streaming on Rise and Resist, through the roof, when we do events and protest and do it, the video always goes the furthest. That's what people are looking at, and that's what they'll stay with and they'll comment at. Those opportunities are available. You could go make your own video. You could go to a park and ask them what they think of Trump. You could practice those kinds of things. One of the videos, the video that Alexandra did which was 2 minutes long, telling you who she was, where she came from, what she wanted to accomplish, was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. It was 2 minutes. It was a voiceover. That's all it was a voiceover. She's getting ready. So you see her apartment, it's not too fancy. She comes up from a basement, so it's not, again, still not fancy. She's on the subway. Then she's at, those things have a huge impact. And that's why all of these people that are on Facebook and Twitter are getting the attention they're getting, because they don't have to wait for somebody to call them to say, will you be on the Today Show? They're doing it themselves. And what's happening is the Today Show, Good Morning America, are calling them because they've got such followings that they want to include them under the tent. Yes?
You were talking about how we can shoot our own video.
Yes.
And one of the things I've noticed working on the Rise and Resist Twitter account, and if anyone's on Twitter, you've probably seen this. You're at a protest, you have some good video or some good photos, and you start seeing all these responses of, I'm with such and such media outlet, can we use this? Or you start getting DMs, can we repost, can we use this video, who do we cite, etc. And usually I would say at protests, we tend to do a lot of kind of group shots, people chanting, actions, people moving, not as much as kind of our own filming of like the kind of person on the street, interview, comment, why are you here, what's going on. But is that, I'm wondering kind of if that's a feasible way to kind of put our own messaging out into the media.
Yes.
Maybe when you're live streaming or when you're shooting kind of 45-second clips for Twitter, what are the sorts of questions that media would want to see answered, and what is the kind of statement from someone in the protest that a media source would be more likely to pick it up and really allow us to kind of directly message through them without kind of having to deal with them as a media source, which often can be kind of hostile, I would say.
It's very simple, believe it or not. It really is. They want sound bites. Sound bites. If you watch, they have terms for things. When I was at MSNBC, it was like wallpaper it. You know what wallpapering is? While you're on a talk show? Wallpaper means that they're going to run Patricia climbing the Statue of Liberty 50 times while they're talking to her. Or if there's a shooting, you're going to see, how it gets looped. My favorite is Paul Manafort while they're waiting for the jury, where he's walking in with his wife, and his wife is like 10 steps ahead of him. Sorry, that was an aside, but I love that thing. But they play that over and over, and they put it on a loop. So, because they think people look at pictures, and they do. So if you have action in the background, Andy, and you have somebody who has something to say, and every event you go to should be talked out beforehand, not randomly we're showing up. It's like, here's what we're doing tomorrow, and let's get comments from 3 people. What are the points we want to make? What's important for us to say? Record them. Now, I'm not talking about editing them, because a lot of people can't edit, but you standing in front of that group and saying something is 30 seconds or 40 seconds. Then you get somebody else and you do it from a different angle, and you keep doing that. That's a way of reporting, and you're getting more time. We're down here at Foley Square because we're doing this, and we're going to be back every Tuesday to anti-impeach or whatever your message is. But now you're the voice that's driving it. You're not waiting for somebody else to do it. So I can't give you specifics of what you're going to say. I can't. If you were in the green room or I had pre-interviewed you, I could give you all of that. If you were writing a book and I was sitting down one-on-one with you, I would talk you through the entire interview. And I'd give you ideas about things to bring up and what was important and what you shouldn't miss. But in a general meeting like this, where I don't know exactly what's important to your groups, I know what's important to our group, and I think we've got to fix some things. And that's, for me, is abolish ICE. Are we going to say that? How are we going to say it? And that's, to me, that's a big deal. Because if I go back to what I think was so effective about Patricia, and by the way, Patricia, who we did not know was going to do what she did. And it wasn't that we didn't, generally things are planned, they're approved, and they're done. She was part of that plan, and then she decided she was going to do her own thing, and we certainly weren't going to leave her hanging. We were going to make sure she was covered, had help with legal and all of those things. But our Twitter account went from 5,000 to 10,000 in 3 days. That's a big thing. But the other part of this is, that's not going to happen every day. That's like a once a year, if you're lucky, kind of an event. But if you know that pictures are driving it, that's what you should be using. And that's the biggest suggestion I can make. And take advantage of your phones and do something different. Do something different. Go someplace and see how it works. And put people on camera. Like, we should be doing mock interviews is what we should be doing. Within your groups, do mock interviews. Somebody get a stopwatch and time it and see how long it is. Generally, they're not, the longest talking points on that interview with Joy Reid were 54 seconds twice. This was Jay, hit 54 seconds twice. But he knew what he was going to say. He wasn't fumbling. He talked about Rise and Resist, what they do, and it was under a minute. And then the next question was another thing that was a little variation of that and a little bit different. I will tell you this, that you are going to run into reporters and interviewers that are going to give you a rough time. Did anybody watch the Brennan interview? Or Steve, Bannon on MSNBC? Any of you? How many of you guys watch cable TV at night? How many? Bingo. Thank you. That says it all. You're not going to get on the Today Show. I didn't want to break your hearts, but you're not. Maybe one or two of you, maybe your daughter, because that's a good idea. But most of you are not going to get that, and most of you aren't watching it anyway. How many watch nightly news? Bingo. All right. How many of you wake up and turn on your computer and check out what's going on? How many of you get your news from your computer? Okay. Why aren't we doing stuff on social media? Screw the rest of it. Be effective. Be good. Look at people who are doing good things and put that on. Keep watching those shows. There are a lot of people's jobs depend on it. But that business generally is dwindling and changing. Yes?
I have a question regarding social media. So I've been doing advocacy for about 20 years. And when I see people on social media who have large followings, it's because they're loud and they say whatever they want to say, which oftentimes is very either controversial, very radical, but not well nuanced, not substance, but just they say what they want to say, and then people, and so my question is, for someone who's been in this space, like I've worked on Capitol Hill, grassroots organizer, City Hall, for people who have expertise and substance to share on different issues and advocacy spaces, especially as the layered and racial lens, I don't have the privilege of saying whatever I want to say to be controversial, the way that a lot of people can do.
You have to watch your message.
I have to be very, very careful to be taken seriously and to be credible, right? Particularly as a woman of color. So my question is, I'm not going to risk my professional reputation that I've built over the last 20 years to be on media or to have a large social Twitter following. So how in particular, how do women or women of color or people who have experience and substance of value, but we don't have the privilege to say whatever we want to say and just vomit controversial points for Twitter followers for the influence.
I don't know that I agree with you that everybody that has a lot of members is that. I went through a list to see who was following because I did my homework to talk to you guys. So I went to find out who has the most followers. And not surprising, anybody want to guess? I was shocked. Who has the most followers on Twitter?
Katy Perry.
Yes. How did you know that? So you looked it up.
Oh, I didn't use Katy Perry.
Katy Perry, but Barack Obama has 114 million followers. Trump has much fewer than that, and Hillary Clinton has quite a few too. The majority of that 100 are celebrities. But still, when you're looking at politics or that, for me, I don't know what to tell you in that respect, because what I'm trying to do is like say, okay, we want to get as much attention for what we're doing as possible, and how do we do that? We can always show pictures, we can always have protests, but how do we take that to the next level? And that's what I'm trying to put out there. There's a guy at Rise and Resist, his name is John. He's got a fantastic voice. He just, I mean, when you stop and turn when you hear him. So one time I went up to him and had him talk. And there were responses immediately to that. I don't know why I haven't done it since, but those are opportunities to take it to a different level, to bring more people under the tent. So, yes.
I understand, I guess, in the context of print journalists, the who, what, why, how. For like the video, the beginning, middle, and end.
Yes.
Like in terms of a protest and a soundbite, what do you mean by beginning, middle, and end?
It would be like, okay, we're here today. That's the beginning. To protest what's going on in immigration, how people are being thrown in cages. That's the middle. The end is, and we're not stopping. We're doing a writing campaign, we're working on the vote, we're doing all of that. It's that simple. It's like, if you want to get your messaging in, we're Rise and Resist, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're an organization that protests this stuff, and we're going to keep doing it. And today, this is what's going on, and you'll keep seeing us. It's that simple. It's that simple. Yes.
I wonder if I could ask, if you're doing one of these, stop and shoot at a protest where you take one individual, but you're shooting the rest of the group in the background, have you found a good way to gather consent of the individuals?
I haven't. I've just done it. I have not done that because I figure that I've been with the group that I'm with, and that's who's protesting. I have also done the march that went over the Brooklyn Bridge. I did that, and I just put it up. I just live streamed it. The rules seem to be less for the time being online than they are. You can't do that on a news organization without clearing it or putting up a sign saying I'm shooting, and if you see this sign, then you're agreeing to be taped. And they do that. But it's kind of a new frontier, as we all know, and so get what you can get. And you might have more trouble if you make somebody look bad, although that doesn't seem to have been a problem. There's more of those than ever. So, yes.
Hi, I'm Corinne. I'm with Young Progressives of America. I have a quick twofold question. One is, we've been really successful about getting Spanish language media,
Yes.
especially around our abolish ICE issues. I was wondering if you have a suggestion about transitioning. And then quickly, the second one is our president, especially since Latino Spanish speaker, and that's the attention has been really highlighted kind of in an individual way. And I'm wondering if you have a suggestion to bring the focus to the work of the organization. And not just the...
From this person who's speaking Spanish?
Well, I'm wondering how do you have any suggestions for if we're getting a lot of Spanish language media crossing over into English language media as well?
Well, there was a woman, and she's now on MSNBC, who was supposed to do that. She was starting in, there was it might have been Fusion, I think it was called, or something like that, that was going to be crossover. But I'm not familiar with it, unfortunately. I don't know.
Okay.
But are they bilingual? Can you
Yes,
do both?
yes.
Well, then, do what you want to do in Spanish, and then put a message in English and say that as well, or duplicate it. But don't do the whole message duplicated.
Because we've had attention on like Telemundo, Univision, like national, but in Spanish. So we're trying to get, because it's Young Progressives in America, an English language organization, because their actions around ICE and immigration are getting a lot of attention from Spanish language media. So
Yes.
okay.
Is there, when you're at these protests, is it only Spanish speaking?
No.
Aggressively go up to somebody, go, hi, I'm with such and such. If you'd like to talk to somebody, I'm happy to talk to you.
Okay.
Be brazen. They don't want to do the work. They don't want to go through the crowd and find people. I'm not joking about that. That's the truth. They've got to then go back, edit it, and put it on the air. You wanted to ask that?
Yes, I was wondering, has there been any change at one time? There was a law with photography that if something is in plain sight in a public space, that it's permissible to photograph it.
I don't know. I know that we had to pay, at all the shows I've worked at, we had to pay for it unless we had permission to use it, and there was a fee, but I think it's a different game. I'm just going to play dumb until I'm stopped. Use it while you can, and if you're stopped, Sorry, we'll take it down.
Maybe one more question, if anyone has.
Anybody else? So I have one last thing to say to you. When you be prepared for tough questions, like I told you. They're going to ask you stuff that you might not want to answer. You can turn that around. And one of the tapes I put in, I don't think it's there, but it's Malcolm Nance. Do you know him? He's on MSNBC a lot. He's formerly in the intelligence community, and it was about the Brennan firing. So the first question went to someone else, and it was about what do you think of the firing. The second question to Nance was like something completely different than why did you fire him? And he goes, well, yes, I'm going to talk about that, but I want to go back to Brennan because I want everybody to know that John Brennan is the guy who killed Osama bin Laden. And by the way, that made me sit up, that made me listen. Then he answered the question. You have the ability, you don't have to sit there and at the end go, God, I wish they'd asked me that question. You turn the conversation around. And you don't do it rudely so they look bad. There's no payoff for making them look bad. But you can easily say, I'll get to that in a minute, but first I need to say this. Boom, boom, boom. And if you take 35 seconds, they're not going to be that upset. So don't think that you're stuck with bad questions. Plow through it. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice. Good luck.